Welcome back to the Stories of Northern Life podcast, brought to you by the Sault Ste. Marie Museum. I'm your host, Nicole, and as we approach November 11th, or Remembrance Day, let us look back on this date and how it began. Remembrance Day was originally known as Armistice Day, as it was the anniversary of the signing of the Armistice. In 1918, on November 11th at 11 a.m. in France, the armistice was signed and the fighting was stopped, bringing an end to the Great War, or World War I. It was at 5 a.m. here in Sault Ste. Marie, and the whistle at the paper mill blew to alert the city that the war was over, and the city woke up and finally were able to celebrate the end of the war. 1 year later, on November 11th, 1919, there didn't seem to be any formal memorial, but at 11 a.m., all industries and public institutions were stopped and observed 2 minutes of silence in accordance with a request from King George V of England. On November 11th, 1920, the anniversary was marked by the new Great War Veterans Association Club house opening. The city also once again observed the 2 minutes of silence. In 1921, on November 11th, they published the poem In Flanders Field as a memorial piece. They also called the day Armistice Day. So this is where we see the first appearance of this term beginning, and also this connection to Remembrance Day or Armistice Day and the poem In Flanders Fields. And also, the red poppies were being used in commemoration, along with the 2 minutes of silence and the cessation of work. The Great War Veterans Association Ladies Auxiliary also organized a dedication service at Greenwood Cemetery. We also see the phrase, "lest we forget," being used in conjunction with Armistice Day. The Dominion government, which is what the Canadian government was referred to as before, called for 2 minutes of silence and a cessation of work across the country. In 1922, we once again observed the 2 minutes of silence, and ceremonies were becoming a bit more elaborate with the offering of floral tributes, or the floral wreaths and maybe some bouquets, and also a banquet at the GWVA, so that's the Great War Veterans Association Club. In 1923, there was a special event, the Soldiers' Reunion and Discovery Week. This was held August 4th to 8th, 1923. And at that time, 2 cairns, 2 war memorials, and 11 plaques were unveiled. This included the cenotaph in front of the courthouse. There was now a memorial to the soldiers where the ceremonies could be held, the wreaths could be placed, and we could remember those who served and whom we lost. We have a booklet at the Sault Museum that you can pick up to help you explore these plaques and monuments. It is now 20 years old, so the Municipal Heritage Committee is actually in the process of updating the booklet, but you can see what was done in 1923 for our soldiers. So stop into the museum and ask for the Plaques and Monuments booklet. It's free, so pick that up and discover those plaques and monuments for yourselves. On Armistice Day in 1924, there was a memorial service at the Civic Monument, or the Cenotaph. Thousands gathered to pay homage, and 2 minutes of silence was observed throughout the city. There was also the Armistice Banquet arranged by the War Veterans Association. In 1925, the Sioux Rangers Bugle Band played and marched along Queen Street to the Cenotaph, and then played the last post just before the clock struck 11, and the town observed 2 minutes of silence. They also sang In Flanders Fields and placed the wreaths at the memorial. After, they proceeded to the cemetery for the service, which appeared to be an annual celebration since 1921. In 1926, they had a simple ceremony at the cenotaph with buglers playing the last post, people laying wreaths, and In Flanders Fields being sung. There was also the third annual Armistice banquet at the Canadian Legion Hall. In 1927, it was the same affair. They were selling poppies and having the banquet as well, along with the ceremony, the 2 minutes of silence, and the laying of the wreaths. In 1930, they reported the most impressive of ceremonies at the cenotaph, with the regimental band, the local regiment, the Navy League boys, and the Boy Scouts. I guess the first cadets we had here was the Navy League. In 1935, they began to refer to Armistice Day also as Remembrance Day. And so here we start to see a little bit beginnings of a change. In 1936, they began fearing that another war was looming, and in 1938, on the 20th anniversary, there was more significance to Armistice Day, as it was not only the 20th anniversary, but also that threat of war was still looming over everyone's head. And then World War II began September 1st, 1939. As Germany invaded Poland, and Canada officially entered the war on September 10th, 1939. Up until 1944, the ceremonies continued, and more emphasis was put on honoring that sacrifice, as our soldiers were currently overseas fighting in yet another world war. In 1943, Armistice Day officially became known as Remembrance Day because of the new casualties and sacrifices of those who were fighting in the Second World War. After 1945, they were celebrating the fallen from the two world wars. I guess there was probably some discussion about moving Remembrance Day because in an article in the Sioux Star from 1949, it read, quote, "It has been, oddly enough, chiefly at the insistence of veterans of the Second World War, that the anniversary of the ceasefire in the First has remained the National Day of Remembrance for the dead of the two wars. The feeling was most strikingly revealed at a post-war National Convention of the Canadian Legion, when a proposal to change the date of Remembrance Day to one more symbolic of the two wars, and one which perhaps be less subject to the vagaries in the weather, was decisively rejected by the newer crop of ex-servicemen." End quote. So there is pretty much how our Remembrance Day was born. The cenotaph was the main location for ceremonies until the Memorial Gardens opened in 1949. They referred to the gardens as a lasting memorial tribute paid by the city of Sault Ste. Marie to our fallen heroes. Wreaths were laid at the cenotaph and the ceremonies held at the gardens. As the years went on, we had more wars, and Remembrance Day continued to honor those who did not make it home. The only time we did not have a ceremony was during COVID, but even then, there were virtual events, and the day did not pass unnoticed. We still wear the poppy, place the wreaths, recite the poem In Flanders Field. Buglers play the last post before we observe a moment of silence. One thing, however, that has changed is not all businesses and industries stop at 11 a.m. to observe the 2 minutes of silence. The engines of industry and business are not allowed to stop anymore as we get farther away from the original Armistice Day. We wage war now, but it's much different than what we saw in World War I and II. Even during the Korean War, they were discussing how businesses were debating as to whether they should allow their employees to attend Remembrance Day ceremonies or not. Some businesses respect the day and allow their employees to observe the day, but often 11 a.m. passes without anyone being the wiser as they go on about their day. So that is the end of our episode. Next week, I will be discussing more about our memorials that we have around the city. When you are on Queen Street downtown, make sure to look up at the lampposts as they have banners of our service members. And if you stop by the museum before Remembrance Day, you can see some of them that we weren't able to put up due to the construction. This is a good opportunity to be able to see them up close. Remember to wear your poppy and think back on its significance and closely read the poem In Flanders Field to understand its message. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. Make sure to give us a rating on your listening platform and keep following us to stay up to date, not only with the podcast, but other museum events. So, thanks for listening. Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, you might like our blog too. Head over to our website, Sault Museum, that's SAULT museum.ca, and look under Discover. You will find our blog, Museum Musings. We share short synopsis of influential people, historic places, and impactful events in our history. Pictures are always included, and you will be sure to learn a little something new with each post.
Hi, I'm J.L. Fizzell, and I write and publish poetry inspired by nature and the art of being human. These are some of my words. The poem I'm about to read for you is from my very first book, Icarus Anchors in You, and it's called The Story of Nostalgia. It's funny how we memorialize objects, gateways to bits and pieces of the past hidden in otherwise inconspicuous items and places. A comforter from your childhood takes you back to a younger age. A smell, a painting, a song, a recipe. A familiarity makes you think you're reliving a moment, but only if you silence the noise. A place reminds you of all the happy moments that came before this one. It makes it easier to hold on to those you've lost. Pieces of their soul hidden for your enjoyment as your heart continues to cry out that it was all gone too soon. It becomes increasingly important to surround yourself with familiarity and tradition, holding on to what and who you've treasured, moments that are still somehow suspended in time. These are the places and things that make me feel most at home. My heart feels the ancient thrum of those before me. I am young, but I am old. I am connected, so I belong. I am reminiscent, so that the past might live on. I hope that this poem took you somewhere inside yourself that you needed to go. You can listen to my story here on the Stories of Northern Life podcast. Links are in the show notes.